Am I gonna regret putting red eyeshadow on my eyelids? Maybe. Now, hello. I am back with another video. So you know what the beginning of the new month means. Wrap up time. So this month actually wasn't too bad. I read 9 books in total, and they're big books in all fairness. But I'm excited to share with you guys the books that I read and my thoughts on them. Like, these videos are always my favorite to film because I get to talk about the books that I read. So the first book that I read, which I started off this month on a strong note, and I read the first book. I gave it 5 stars, and it's called My Body by Emily Ratajkowski. I hope I pronounced that right. But I absolutely adored it. It's an autobiography, I think, and I enjoyed it because honestly, like, most of the time I don't really enjoy reading autobiographies because I feel like that they're boring. Like, you're reading about someone's life unless you absolutely adore this person. But I don't know much about Emily. However, reading that autobiography, I felt like I was talking to her, or she was talking to me about everything: the body, the Hollywood, what it really is like being a model, and what her life was like. And honest to God, she was just so raw, so real, like, and I love that. Like, that was my favorite part. She wasn't hiding anything. She didn't seem like she wrote the book just to write the book. So for that reason, I did give it 5 stars. Like, and it just was so easy to read it. Like, the writing style was just like so damn good. Anyway, the second book that I read, it's Let Her Go by Blake Pierce. And listen, I have a feeling I'm not going to enjoy Blake Pierce's books. So this is the second book that I read of him, and I just felt like it lacked something in the body. Like, it lacked in the body. It felt very flat, and by the end of it, when you get to the end, like, it kind of dragged out a little bit, and then by the end, when you get to the end, you're not very mind blown of the whole reveal of who is the murderer. So it wasn't even exciting for me. I originally gave it, oh yeah, it is 2 stars. So I gave it 2 stars, which is low, but I didn't like his writing style. I didn't like the plot. I liked one of the characters. One of the characters just did not seem annoying. And that's why it's 2 stars. And also, what really annoyed me, every new chapter you're not sure whose POV you're reading. Like, not for me. But the female main character, she works in the lab in the FBI department, and her specialty is bugs. I mean, I thought that was very unique. Like, you wouldn't read about anything like a character like that. Now, the next book that I read is Loath to Love You by Ali Hazelwood. And I didn't actually realize, but it's not like a book. It's 3 novellas in a book. So it's basically on the 3 best friends and their relationships. And I think I enjoyed the first novella the most, because the other 2, they kind of had a little bit hint of a miscommunication trope, and I hate reading about miscommunication. Like, it's just not my favorite kind of thing to read about. So I did give it 4 stars. It could have been 5 stars, but I actually absolutely hate starting a book. I just find it so difficult and for some reason draining to start a book. And as soon as I started loving the first novella, it ended, and I had to read, like, and I had to move on to the second novella, and it took me longer than it should to finish this book, because it felt like starting a new book. You're being introduced new characters, new plot and that kind of thing. And then the same thing with the third novella. It's a spicy kind of book, and if you don't like spice, I might not suggest it for you. It might not even be for you. But I adore Ali Hazelwood's writing. I think it's so good and so unique. It's like, the first one is Roommates and Forced Proximity, and the second and third is Work Dating, and the third one is Damsel in Distress kind of vibe. But I prefer the first one the most because like she inherits half of a house, like half of a mansion, and the other house or the other half of the house belongs to a solicitor, and he keeps trying to buy her out of the house and she just won't budge. She's there, she loves the house, even though they kind of have a bit of a enemies concept. They're not real true enemies, maybe a bit more of Grump versus Sunshine kind of vibe. And the next book that I read is Siege and Storm, and look at the cover of this. This is such a beautiful cover. Grishaverse, and it's the second book in Shadow and Bone series. I thought I was gonna like this one a little bit more than the first, and I feel like I do like this one maybe a tiny little bit more than the first book, but there's a reason why all the books have animals on the covers. Like, there's a reason. But it's a 4-star book for me. I enjoyed it. There's more characters in this, a bit more to the plot, and yeah, it's a beautiful world. But one thing I will say, Lee Bardugo is not for beginner fantasy. Yeah, and just do with it whatever you want. If you want to, go ahead and try and reading it, but I feel like it's a bit harder to grasp. Now, moving on to another Lee Bardugo book, and it's Hellbent. The cover of this looks absolutely stunning as well, and it's the second book in, what was the series called? Ninth House series. And I had such high expectations for this book. And I know I had high expectations for the first one, but for this one I genuinely thought that there would have more action to it. Like, it kind of did have a little bit more, but I kept going back and forth because I wasn't sure if I preferred the first book over this one or this one over the first. And I didn't even like the first one that much. I gave it 3 stars, and this one is 3 stars for me as well. It's a bit slow, that's the thing. It felt like nothing really was happening, or the main character kept going in circles, and by the end of it, everything just went super fast. And the end, I'm like, okay, well, the next book is gonna come out and it's gonna be more exciting, but I kind of feel like it's not gonna keep getting any exciting than it is. And just like I've said, Lee Bardugo, she has a very unique writing style, but it's not beginner fantasy, or at least I literally find it so difficult. But yeah, I also really wanted to see more of the Arlington character. You just see this little glimpse of him, and I just wanted more. I wanted to see him interact with all these other characters, and no, maybe next book. Moving on to a big boy, moving on to the big guns. I mean, this was 800 pages long, you guys. This was way too long for the first book in the series. This should have been a crime, honest to God. Like, don't get me wrong, I love Sarah J Maas, like, with all my heart. I love the way that she writes books, but it was a bit more difficult to keep going. First of all, it had so many characters in this, right? And all kinds of monsters and angels and werewolves and vampires and demons and half-breeds and just any kind of monster you can think of, it is in this book. And then I totally understand, like, there's no way that this book could have been shorter than it already is. Like, it's 800 pages. Like, I don't see how it could have been shorter. But I give it 4 stars. Like, it was enjoyable read, but it wasn't 5-star read for me. Maybe 4.25. I loved how this book started, and then like within maybe 50 pages it crushed my heart. I did not expect that, but in the last 200 pages of this book I just kept bawling my eyes out, but like in a happy way. Like, I wasn't upset about it, like I wasn't mad at it. The way that it ended and the action and everything, it made so much sense, and I was so happy for these characters. It was a happy ending, by the way. But it's basically about the main character, Bryce. I can't technically say too much, but she gets asked to help out the case, a murder case because all these murders started to happen, and it is a friendship to lovers, and I love the characters, I love the world. Then the next book that I read is Before We Were Strangers, and this one is a romance, and I gave it 4.5 stars. Like, I loved it at the time that I read it, but I haven't really thought about it. You know, when you love a book so much and it just lives in your head rent-free? This, I haven't thought about it since I read it. And I love the way that this book was written. It wasn't like toxic or whatsoever about you know, these two characters who end up meeting one another in college, and they get this instant attraction for one another, and they become great friends, and later on obviously friends to lovers. But it's the way that they've befriended one another and what they went through together. I loved it. Like, it was just so real and so raw, and just, I loved it. There's a massive plot twist at the end which I didn't expect to see, and I loved it. And they do obviously get to meet one another down the line. They got basically out of touch. Then the next book I read is The Summer Place. Now this is where my reading month started to go a bit down the hill, and it's the first book that I read of Jennifer Weiner. Is that how you pronounce her name? It felt like character development driven kind of book. So it's about every single point of view from each character that you can think of, their mother, their grandfather, and just like every single character. Oh, can I say that really annoyed me and really frustrated me, because like I did not expect that, first of all. Second of all, what I really didn't like is it was based kind of roughly in COVID, and it's not something that I want to remember. Like, it's just not something that I even want to read about. But it had all the tropes that I didn't like: the cheating, the betrayal, just every single character. It just wasn't likable. There was no remorse felt for any of them. Like, just no, because they all kind of like did something bad in life, or you know, the cheating or whatever it was, and it just like wasn't enjoyable. That's what I mean, just wasn't enjoyable whatsoever. I don't want to even spoil anything, but I just no, I just kept thinking no. Well, I gave it 2 stars. Like, I'm sure like the writing wasn't bad, but it's just plot that I didn't like, the characters I didn't like, and it actually gets worse. Now the last book that I read of the month, which is my 9th book, I gave it 1 star, and it's My Killer Vacation, I think it's called. Now it's my first Tessa Bailey book that I've read, and I had high expectations for this one actually, so I was gutted. The first chapter was fine, like it just wasn't, don't have anything bad to say about the first chapter. But in the second chapter, when Miles gets introduced, who's one of the main characters, and Taylor, who is the other main character, and so when literally as they meet one another, they get I couldn't read it. I just know, I kept thinking, oh no, it's fine, it's gonna get better, like it's fine. No, it did not get better. It just kept getting worse and worse, and by the end of it I just didn't care about the book. I didn't care about the characters. It was just pretty much purely smut, and it was supposed to be about this murder that happened in summer vacation house that Taylor and her brother have been renting for 5 days, I think it was, and it turns out to be their landlord, and would have been fine, right? But then by the end of it, when the murder gets revealed, it made no sense why it was that person, and I didn't even care about it. I wasn't shocked. I just, yeah, it was just a very painful book to get through for me, and I'll give Tessa Bailey obviously another chance to redeem herself, but I feel like it's just not for me. And usually I'm okay to read smut, I'm okay to read spice, but this one just was so cringe, and it was the first cringe book, like it was the first cringy smut book I read. Like usually they're not so cringe. And it's funny because like I want to find a good vacation, summer, beach kind of book, because so far the ones I've read I just wouldn't recommend, and I want to find a couple good ones to be able to recommend and to actually enjoy for myself. But that's all the books that I read this month. 9 isn't too bad considering the fact that I read one of the books that was 800 pages long. But let me know what books I should read next if you have any suggestions, and thank you so much for watching. Bye.